You know, I should have asked ChatGPT to write this episode's intro, but I didn't. So here's AI for CX by the numbers. AI has been a major topic across departments over the past couple of years, and customer experience is no exception. And that's why we're really excited to talk about some of our latest research on AI today. And I'm really happy to be joined by my awesome colleague, Stacy Parr, to go through some of our latest findings. How's it going, Stacy?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with our rundown and share a little bit more about this research. Here at Medallia, we recently surveyed over 800 CX practitioners, the majority in the United States, but also had some representation in other countries like the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand to get a perspective across businesses of how AI is being used and what upcoming priorities and challenges are for the world of CX. So based on this composition of respondents that range from various levels of seniority, company size, industry, we're really excited to share a pretty complete perspective on how CX practitioners are viewing AI today. Let's get started and talk a little bit about one of our first findings, which is independent of how organizations have implemented AI. We've asked CX practitioners about their own personal use and experimentation with AI. And maybe not so much of a surprise, but interesting to put some numbers behind it. We see that a very large majority of CX practitioners have at least attempted the use of AI in some fashion professionally. It's 90% in total, and then 42%. So we're now at almost half say it is a very often part of their work already today too. When we've asked respondents to comment on the implementation of AI in their organizations and how that's gone compared to expectations so far, those who have organizations that are using AI now are very likely to say that the result is either meeting or exceeding expectations. Nearly nobody would say that it's been below expectations, and you've even got more than half that say it's exceeded expectations. So really positive response. I'm wondering if maybe people had expectations that were a little bit too low to begin with. I don't know exactly how to take of this overwhelming positiveness, but it surely does show a lot of potential for where AI can go from here based on these results seen so far.
There's just so much noise about AI and what it can do and what it shouldn't do and what you don't want it to do, that I think having this gentle ease into AI in a business perspective, I think it is pleasantly surprising to people about how it can impact their day-to-day life. I think people are really responding to it in a positive way.
One thing that I think is interesting too is this recognition that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach and not everyone's created equal. When we've profiled companies that are especially likely to say that their investment in AI has met or exceeded expectations so far, the companies that really stand out are the ones that say that they've put an especially large investment behind it, that they're particularly large enterprises too. And then also if they're using AI solution vendors as opposed to trying to do this just by themselves, the ones that have the resources and the prioritization behind AI are really seeing the investment the most. There are a lot of considerations and even concerns over risks that CX practitioners have mentioned when we've questioned their implementation. So we've seen several things bubble up as fears. In their own words, CX practitioners are especially likely to say things like concern over accuracy, concern over displacing jobs and roles within an organization, and then also the ethics, the biases that could be at play if this isn't done well, and just the cost to implement and maintain are all factors. So when we've asked them beyond those fears, what have been the biggest priorities in actually picking a solution or designing a solution, a lot of these things really are centered more around data protection than they are even things like the finances or the technical capabilities of their organization. This security, this consumer privacy, all of these factors, I think in many ways, rightfully so, are what's bubbling up, and they are the number one non-negotiable in the eyes of brands that are adding AI into their toolkit.
It does seem to be the red flag whenever AI is a topic of discussion. We've all heard that term, dirty data, and the data you put in is the data you get out. So my question to you is, do companies need to invest in cleaning their data, doing a cleanse, and basically tidying up their information prior to using an AI tool so that they can avoid pulling analytics, pulling insights, pulling stats that maybe are skewed because the data is dirty.
I think that is such an important point, especially because I think we're often asking AI to do things that would be too time consuming or outside the skill set of a regular role today. If we're asking AI to do something where you don't know if the answer is right or wrong, you really need to have confidence in the input. With that trust that you're putting in AI to process a massive amount of data, to do it at a speed that would be outside the realm of what a human could do, if it's limited based on either inaccurate, missing, or just overall disorganized data, then the limitations are going to be pretty severe of the quality that you get out of it, as you said, too.
It's a big step you need to take in order to be successful.
Without a doubt. Something that really stands out to me that's interesting is when we asked our respondents to talk about the way that they are measuring the impact of AI and why they feel confident that it's either meeting or exceeding expectations in most cases, a lot of the metrics or measurements are more around internal efficiencies. Things like reducing time on tasks, speed at which tasks could be completed, also the cost reduced. Many cases it might be because of roles that are dedicated to a task, also error reduction. A lot of these AI use cases are more internally driven for analysis, processing, operational things. It's not just generative content that is customer facing. A lot of these AI advances haven't occurred just in the past year or two. This has been a buildup of a lot of AI enablement, especially for internal uses, that's lasted for many years before this.
I think a lot of people have been using AI and maybe didn't even realize that it has been behind the scenes, basically as the engine to certain processes, to some of your most common and repeatable interactions.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that's interesting too about this list of what was most commonly cited as a way organizations are measuring the impact of AI is the role of feedback. So many things can be measured. You can quantify and calculate the amount of resources that are spent on something, how much time they spent on it, but knowing whether it worked well, whether there were hiccups, whether there were new issues that emerged in the process, you do really need the voice of those that are experiencing it every day. And what made this top list too are things like measurement based on customer feedback of AI-related experiences and employee feedback of AI capabilities that were introduced to them too. You see 70% of organizations already have one or more roles dedicated solely to Gen AI. You've got nearly the same percentage that would say that they're currently hiring for more AI roles. And about half of organizations already do have some sort of AI-focused executive with a title based around AI on their team too.
Using these AI tools helps us to understand who our customers are, the things that they like, how they're responding to what we're producing, and then how we can make business decisions based on that information.
We asked respondents to talk about what their organization already has been pursuing based on various use cases of AI, and then also what they hadn't yet, but for the first time this year plan to start pursuing. And a lot of the things that they plan to start pursuing that move up to the top ranking are very balanced between this more customer-facing approach with things like Gen AI for customer-facing uses, but also a lot of the still operational behind-the-scenes things too. So things like simulating or predicting consumer behavior and outcomes, that can be a very big input into a more personalized experience, of course. Also improving access and classification of internal documents and data, part of a lot of that, avoiding that garbage in, garbage out problem. And then some other things too, like automated actioning of comms, closing the loop, and Gen AI for employee knowledge and productivity, which could certainly go a long way too for things like contact center enablement and many other areas where the front line is interacting with the customer directly too. Before we finish off for today, though, we do have time for one more segment, which is our outliers.
Outlier alert.
This is a segment where we take a finding from our research that is maybe particularly surprising or just not what we would have expected to see. And the one that I thought was interesting from this report was our question to CX practitioners of how they feel their progress in AI is compared to their competition. And I would have expected a little bit more cautiousness or pessimism among the part of CX practitioners and concern that they're slipping behind, but only 12% are feeling that they might be behind competitors. The remainder mostly would say they're at least on par, or you've even got a third that think that they're ahead of the competition. It does seem to be that many of them are a little overly confident, perhaps. Is this something that surprises you, Stacey? And do you think that this might change over time?
I'm excited that people are excited about it and less fearful. I do think that has been such a concern and a topic of discussion about letting the fear of AI impede their growth. So I am just as surprised and happy as you are to see these numbers about the confidence that people have in their systems and their roadmap for the future.
I agree. Very well said. And another thing in the report, too, that I think helps temper the risk of overconfidence is that when we have asked people to assess the maturity of their AI toolkit within their organizations, they do seem to be more modest in that case and recognize that there's a lot of room to grow. So, yeah, I read this like you are here of it might be interesting the amount of confidence that exists, but I think that there's a more realistic recognition of how much more there is to go and that we're really just at the beginning of this journey in many ways. Stacey, thank you so much again for joining me. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Just to recap and round off where we've been today, we've talked a lot about the wide adoption, both as individuals and for organizations with the world of AI. And we've also focused heavily on the positive initial reception compared to expectations and how much of the measurement of AI and the use cases have been focused not just on Gen AI, but also on many operational, analytical, and process-oriented uses too. We then rounded it off by talking more about how use cases are evolving and organizations are focusing on a lot more customer-facing applications in the 12 months to come. If you are interested in reading the rest of our findings, we do have a link to the full report down here below. Otherwise, we'll catch you again on the next episode. Thanks again for listening.